What if the perfect planet wasn't so perfect? When our explorers found Earth's twin, a world almost indistinguishable from our own, they thought they'd stumbled upon a miracle. But beneath its familiar surface lurked a nightmare waiting to unravel them one by one. Before we dive into this chilling tale of deception and survival, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more unsettling stories of the unknown. Your support helps us bring you the darkest, most mysterious narratives from across the universe. When Captain Elias Renner and the crew of the Argosy stumbled upon the planet, they were expecting barren rock or frozen wastelands. What they saw instead was almost too perfect to believe. Earth 2.0, Elias muttered, leaning forward in his chair, eyes locked on the view screen. The planet rotated slowly before them, a swirling masterpiece of blue, green, and white. From orbit, the resemblance to Earth was uncanny. Oceans sparkled, continents sprawled with eerily familiar shapes, and clouds drifted lazily across a vibrant atmosphere. The ship's biologist, Dr. Sienna Karras, was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. It's not just similar, it's identical. Look at those continents. That coastline could be California, and that one there, that's Africa. This shouldn't be possible. Engineer Vincent Rao scoffed, arms crossed. Impossible is right. This reeks of something unnatural. No way we just stumbled across an interstellar twin of Earth. Elias couldn't help but feel a flicker of unease at Rao's words. But the promise of salvation was too tantalizing to resist. Humanity had been on borrowed time for years, struggling to survive on a crumbling Earth. The discovery of a new home felt like a miracle. But miracles often come at a price. The Argosy began its descent cautiously. Every instrument on board confirmed the planet was hospitable, perhaps even more so than Earth. Gravity, atmosphere, temperature, everything was as if nature had hit copy-paste. Their first encounter with the locals was even more surreal. As the landing party stepped onto soft grass beneath a golden sun, a group of humanoids approached. They were startlingly familiar, human in every way, right down to their expressions of awe and curiosity. The leader of the locals, a tall man with sharp features, introduced himself as the Los. His speech was broken but intelligible, a garbled form of English that seemed to have diverged centuries ago. "Welcome," he said, smiling warmly. "You are visitors? From beyond?" "Yes," Elias replied cautiously, extending a hand. The Los grasped it with enthusiasm, his grip firm and warm, his gaze intense. "We happy. Much to show. Much to share." The city they were led to was dazzling. Towering buildings of glass and metal glittered in the sunlight, while green parks and gardens sprawled between them. Children laughed as they played in the streets, and vendors sold strange but enticing wares from colorful carts. The air smelled sweet and fresh, a stark contrast to the polluted remnants of Earth. "It's perfect," Sienna whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "Almost too perfect." Elias felt it too, that nagging feeling that something was just a little too pristine, too orderly. But he brushed it aside. The crew was ecstatic, and for now there were no obvious threats. Days passed, and the crew settled into a routine of exploration and diplomacy. The locals were eager to share their knowledge, showing off advancements in technology that mirrored Earth's but with subtle differences, as if history here had followed an alternate path. At night, however, Elias began to dream. The first dream was fragmented and strange. Dark corridors lined with pulsating webs, faint whispers that seemed to crawl into his ears. He woke drenched in sweat, heart racing, but shook it off as fatigue. Then others started to report odd experiences. Lieutenant Harper mentioned feeling watched, even when alone. Engineer Patel claimed he heard faint clicking noises, like distant insect legs tapping against metal. Still, there was no tangible evidence of anything amiss. And then Harper vanished. The locals' explanation was maddeningly vague. The Los simply shrugged. "He wander. It happens. Happens," Elias repeated, his voice tight with frustration. "My man wouldn't just wander off. He was disciplined. He had his calms." The Los only smiled, his expression infuriatingly calm. "No worry. All fine. The captain ordered a search party, but Harper was nowhere to be found. By the next day, the whispers among the crew turned to dread. Then Patel was found dead in his quarters. The autopsy was inconclusive. A heart attack, they said, but Elias couldn't shake the memory of Patel's face, frozen in an expression of pure terror. By now, the captain's unease had grown into full-blown paranoia. He began to notice things he hadn't before. The local smiles, so warm at first, now seemed a little too practiced, too wide. Their eyes held an unsettling depth, as if something lurked behind them, watching, calculating. And there was the webbing, faint strands that seemed to glisten in the corners of rooms or drift unnoticed through the air. Elias dismissed them as spider silk or plant fibers, but when he ran a scan with his suit, the readings came back anomalous. By the sixth night, Elias could no longer ignore the signs. He activated his suit's dampeners, shielding his brain from external interference. It was then, through the artificial clarity, that he saw the truth. Slipping away from the banquet that night, Elias wandered the alleys behind the city's bright facades. His heart pounded as he moved deeper into the shadows, his suit's sensors picking up faint energy readings. What he found shattered him. A massive warehouse stood at the city's edge, its windows blacked out. Inside, the locals were shedding their skins, literally. Their human forms fell away like discarded costumes, revealing grotesque, spider-like creatures with segmented bodies and long, spindly limbs. Their eyes, black and soulless, glittered in the dim light as they worked, spinning cocoons around limp human forms. Elias stumbled back, choking on bile. The people of Terra Novum weren't human at all. They were predators, parasites who had perfected the art of mimicry to lure their prey. Elias returned to the ship, his mind racing. Bursting into the bridge, he tried to warn his crew, but they stared at him blankly, their faces slack and unresponsive. Thin, shimmering strands of webbing connected them to the walls, to each other. The creatures were feeding on them, draining their life force. "Get up!" Elias shouted, activating an EMP burst from his suit. The wave severed the webbing, and the crew snapped out of their trances, blinking in confusion. But it was already too late. The Terra Novans had discovered their defiance. The creatures swarmed the ship, abandoning their human facades in favor of their monstrous forms. What followed was a desperate battle as the crew fought to repel the invaders. Plasma bolts illuminated the darkened corridors, slicing through chitinous armor. But for every creature they killed, more poured in. In the end, Elias made the hardest decision of his life. He rigged the ship's engines to overload, creating a massive explosion that incinerated the creatures in the hangar. As the survivors scrambled aboard, he piloted the Argosy into orbit, leaving the nightmare behind. Or so they thought. Elias sat in the command chair, his hands trembling. The planet shrank behind them, its perfect facade now burned into his memory. They had survived, but at what cost? Only a handful of his crew remained, their faces hollow and pale. As he gazed out the viewport, something felt off. The stars outside the ship seemed to ripple, as if viewed through a distorted lens. The console beeped, and Elias's blood ran cold. The Argosy's systems had overridden his commands. The ship wasn't heading toward Earth anymore. The navigation screen blinked with a single word: Terra Novum. "No," Elias whispered, his voice shaking. "That's not possible." And then he saw it. The faint, shimmering strands of webbing stretching across the bridge, binding him to his seat. They pulsed rhythmically, almost alive. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy, his mind foggy. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest. They had never escaped. The explosion, the flight into orbit, it had all been an illusion. A final deception crafted by the creatures to keep their prey docile. In the shadows of the ship, something clicked. The faint sound of legs skittering against metal. Elias's screams were the last thing the crew heard before silence reclaimed the ship. The next time you gaze at the stars, remember, not everything out there is waiting to be discovered. Some things are waiting to discover you. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that'll keep you awake at night. Until next time, stay vigilant. You never know what's lurking in the void.